Throughout my career, for the past like 8 years in coffee, I've learned a lot about the complexity of where it comes from. And what I've learned is that the fast food nature of most coffee that's out on the market sort of skips over a lot of the really important pieces of that chain. So there's a lot of lost potential. And so we're trying to provide those experiences in an accessible way consistently for the average consumer. So commodity coffee is essentially a system where it doesn't matter where the coffee comes from, it doesn't matter what the quality of the coffee is, and it doesn't matter what the producer is paid. The only price consideration is the international traded market price called the C market. Which is like a futures price, just like oil or like any other kind of commodity. So usually when a farmer sells their coffee into the commodity market, there are buying stations that will just buy coffee by weight, regardless of the quality of the preparation, of who it's coming from or how it was produced. They'll just bring a bunch of coffee. You get today's C price, which bounces up and down every single day and is traded the price just like any other sort of stock exchange. And that is generally a really poor way to make a living for a coffee farmer, and it's a really poor way to get a quality product and a transparent product to the consumer. And this is going to be most of the gas station coffee you drink, most of the instant coffee. These are big buyers of like commodity coffee, and this is where cheap coffee comes from. C market coffee is not sustainable because we're talking about an agricultural product with a really intensive input of labor and cost for production. The C market commodity price is influenced most heavily by the largest market in the world, which is Brazil, where the production is mechanized and automated much more than in any other producing country. So you get this cost of production in Brazil, which allows them to sustain lower prices than anywhere else in the world. So the C market, by sort of cutting out the majority of farmers in the world, which are these small farmers with really high costs of production who have no input on how much they can sell their coffee for, it creates a really volatile livelihood for them, where usually they're barely making money and most of the time they're selling their coffee below the cost of production. And so you're going to see a lot of coffee farmers leave the field of coffee in favor of other crops that might get them more money. The ways that it could impact the industry and prices in the future are really complex and sort of unknown. Specialty coffee is really defined more by cup quality, which is sort of subjective. So a more objective kind of way to look at a specialty coffee company or roaster is, can they tell you with authority like where the coffee's coming from, who's producing it? Would they feel comfortable sharing with you how much they pay for the coffee? Can they tell you a little bit about the source, and do they have a more relationship-based buying philosophy where they want to see their farmers do well and take a mentality of the success of the producer is going to lead to more success for me and then a better product for my consumers. So it's a more sustainable alternative largely because we're combating this sort of trend of like low commodity prices kind of driving farmers away from the business in general. So we pay a little bit more for the coffee, therefore the consumer has to pay a little bit more. But the reason that we pay more is so that we know that the farmers can continue to do this and to invest in what they do and do it in a way that's sustainable for their local environment and local community. So, I think that at the end of the day, all three of those concerns, fair pay, sustainability, and quality, kind of come down to the traceability of the coffee. So if you can transparently see where the coffee is coming from and how it's being sourced and who's growing it, then you are able to verify that it's being produced sustainably, that the people are getting paid well, and a transparent system feeds back on itself to produce better quality. We see that in a lot of different types of food and beverage where people care more about where it's coming from, and for all the same reasons. The reasons are usually they want to know that it's being produced ethically, that maybe the people who are growing it are actually making a fair living wage doing the work that they're doing. And for all the same reasons you want to know information about your coffee, and particularly with coffee, it can be so shrouded in mystery about where it's coming from and so misunderstood in most people's minds about what coffee is and how it's produced and what the value is. And the people who produce it are generally so poorly paid for so much work that I think it's even more important to know when you look at a product like coffee that is generally produced in poor countries and consumed in rich countries. I think it's sort of a moral responsibility to kind of know where it's coming from and know that that production is ethical and sustainable. So fair trade is one of these things where it's kind of like it's better than nothing, sort of, if you don't know anything else about the coffee. The way the fair trade market works, almost all coffee buying, even a lot of specialty coffee buying, is priced on a differential above the C market. So as the C market kind of moves up and down, the fair trade price moves up and down with the C market at like sort of a fixed differential above that. And so that's better than nothing, but it's still not high prices, not what you consider like fair living wage most of the time. And when the C market is as low as it is now, which is almost like $1 per pound, which is extremely low, the fair trade price hits a minimum floor that it can't go below. And that minimum floor, I might get the number wrong. I think it's either $1.60 per pound or $1.40 per pound. Either of those are extremely low when you consider that recent reports have shown that the average cost of production in Latin America is $1.90 per pound. So the fair trade minimum price, which is where it is right now because the C market is so low currently, is below the cost of production on the average farm in Latin America. So that's what's wrong with fair trade, is that it's better than nothing, but it's still not nearly enough. And it doesn't have any bearing on quality or demands for transparency. It only sort of ensures that kind of a baseline of human dignity is respected in the supply chain. Same with organic, is sort of similar. Organic is good. Actually, both of these certifications cut out a lot of small farmers that can't afford to pay the certifying body to come and do it for them. They ensure some good things, but they don't do nearly enough for the prices and for the assurance of quality and sustainability, which we think the best assurance for sustainability for a coffee farmer's livelihood is to be able to produce and get better prices for a better quality product. So if you want to be really price sensitive about the coffee that you buy, which is understandable for a lot of people, I mean, coffee is generally really undervalued and prices are just really low when you compare them to other agricultural products. But if you need to be really price sensitive, but you want to make sure that the coffee has at least some like sort of baseline level of standards for the way that people are treated during production, then fair trade is kind of better than nothing if that's like you're shopping in the supermarket. But fair trade doesn't necessarily mean that you, like, if you're buying fair trade coffee but you don't know anything else, like there's no other information that's more specific about like the country it's coming from or something like that, then chances are that it's at the bottom end of fair trade. You know, bigger companies that tend to have a difficult time providing this sort of transparency on all their products because they have to buy so much coffee that they're buying it from many different sources and kind of putting it all together. That if you're going to buy a big name brand like that, then generally it is good to shop by certification. Big companies have to operate differently than like small companies like us. And they tend to care and do a good job, and I think as good a job as they can do in the way they source coffee given their size. Look for the coffee from companies that seem to care, like they sell their coffee in whole bean bags that are sealed, and they have certain indications that they at least kind of care about the quality of their product, which has a trickle down effect to like the rest of the way they source the coffee. But I think it's better, and with it, like in a lot of food items, it's better to sort of look more local, look to the smaller companies and who are local to you, generally, because they tend to work within a smaller slice of the industry, and that allows them to focus more on good quality coffee, smaller lots from individual farmers, and more assurances that there's sort of an ethical supply chain all the way down. So the industry has changed quite a bit in the last 10 to 20 years. The specialty sector has grown a lot. In the last 20 years, we've seen a lot more transparency in supply chain, sort of led by the specialty side of the business. So now we can trace coffees back to individual small farmers who might only have an acre or two of land, like at the smallest level. So that's one of the biggest changes, and that's really influenced our perception of what quality coffee is, what's important in the trade. And I see that sector growing, and we're going to have to see a lot more farmers, particularly in the future, figuring out ways to produce quality coffee at production volumes that can sustain a living. I mean, there are a lot of reasons to care, and a lot of them, you could talk about, the ethics and the taste quality and the environment, but I think that the most basic kind of universal reason to care is the price. And if you're going to buy just the cheapest coffee that you can find today, because that's what you think it's worth, then you're sort of feeding into this system that I think is going to collapse the current kind of status quo eventually, and prices are going to go up one way or another for all the reasons we've kind of discussed. Like eventually, at the current system, prices will go up, and you will end up paying more for that gas station coffee or for the cheap stuff. Maybe even the prices that you might have to pay today for the specialty stuff, you're going to be paying that anyway in, say, 10 years maybe, if we continue the current system and we continue to undervalue the coffee as a product.